Hi everyone. Yeah, my name's Jonathan Keeling. I'm no longer Chief Growth Officer at Crowdcube. So I was part of most part of my career was part of Crowdcube from very early days. I was there for best part of a decade from pre-Series A to January this year. And since January, I've been working as a consultant supporting startups, founders, scale ups with everything from kind of in-house crowdfunding services to fractional commercial support, everything from fundraising, sales strategy, marketing, community, that sort of stuff. Before Crowdcube, I was at a clean tech company which I scaled on the commercial side from pre-revenue to 3 million in turnover, and I led a 2 million pound crowdfund in 2015, which was, I guess, like the first year of the hype curve for equity crowdfunding, alongside companies like Sugru, Just Park. Trying to think of a couple of classics, but that was the first wave. After then, you saw the Monzos and the Revoluts and Brewdogs and Free Trades of the world come in and do crowdfunding too. So yeah, my focus has always been on broadly sales, commercial, marketing, and fundraising. And I'm here to talk about probably the best part and focus for the day or for the session is to talk about the funding gap, or what I call the funding gap, and that's area between your kind of seed stage and your Series A, probably your Hambro Perks, who I think was the email I just saw on this call before. So, like, how do you get from early traction to the metrics you want to achieve, or you need to be showing you've achieved to unlock a Series A?
Mhm. And then one of the things that I think a lot of founders here, so we're on week 5 of the program, we've had a lot of angel investors coming in. So this group of founders is at kind of seed stage. So the majority of them have raised for about 290K on average, and raising again around 750, a million in this round. They've met angel investors every single week, and I think there's a lot of conversation around, do you take money from angels or VCs at this stage? What are the benefits of each? But then there's also the potential to
Interesting.
take money from the rest of your community. And with the ease of Sam from Hambro Perks just talking about it, but SPVs and the fact that you can start an SPV with Odin or Carter and get, friends, family, customers, community members, other people in your network to invest with a very small ticket and round them all up without spending a huge amount of money. That's another opportunity for founders to
Yeah.
some investor traction. So with your expertise of building out those crowdfunding marketing campaigns for companies that you worked with, can you go through a bit more information about how you might start a funnel of information to your customers to build awareness of the fact that they've got an opportunity to invest in
Yeah.
your startup and what that might look like?
Yeah. Yeah. I think fantastic. I think a completely fair point there, right? Everyone is now an investor. Um, Obviously, crowdfunding enables that more so than anything, with the availability of investing in startups and getting equity from £10. But in reality, you've got, like you said, the Odins, the Seed Legals, the Carters of the world, which are typically taking checks from £1,000 now. And you need £100,000 checks to write an okay pre-seed round. And you'll be surprised through your first connection, second connections, family, friends, how many people there are who might want to invest in your business. So I think what we've seen, like you said there, Purdy, is the last 18 months has seen this sort of evolution of new technological tools that really reduce the cost of the legals and the structuring and the management of cap tables to give people the ability to raise from a much broader audience at a much lower cost. Now, the challenge linked to that is obviously the regulatory landscape, and you've probably saw a lot of the news over the last couple of years around the thresholds for what constitutes a high net worth or an accredited investor, and there was a lot of fuss and noise around that being increased, but then it was also then redacted, wasn't it, back down to that £100,000 level. But in reality, it's still a little bit hazy as to kind of what the hard rules are around promoting the ability to invest in a startup on a social channel or by email to your customer base, for example. I think best rule of thumb here is to think about how to create a funnel, as Purdy said. And for me, looking at a kind of a traditional fundraise, whether you're talking to VC or angels or a mini crowdfund offline or big crowdfund, same rules apply. Fundraising is a campaign, and you are taking people on a journey to validate an investment decision as they go. Now, I'm fractional CCO for a company I've been working for 5 months now. We have a short list of the VCs that we want on our cap table for Series A. We know that they're following us on LinkedIn. We're not talking about fundraising, but we know that every single post that we put out is a signal and a validator for them to invest and build up their confidence to want to back us at the point at which we then ask for money. So everything that you talk about, everything that your brand stands for, is a signal for building up to that point at which you want to take investment. The important point here, I guess, is the actual period at which you're fundraising. And I think this is something that people get really wrong, and where angels get a bad rep for, taking so long to close off a round. And one of the beauties of crowdfunding is that it's time based, and there's nothing stopping you creating a time based activity in an offline format as well. So suggesting that you want to close your round by the end of July, or saying that you are going to do so, because that's number one. You're either on this or you're not on this, and we are closing this in July. Here are the terms. So it's important that you're very clear and very confident in the timings and the round structure and what you're doing to deliver that round. And then the idea of you actively fundraising or publicly fundraising would be seeding out content over a period of time, building up an addressable audience, and then closing them off through, a Seed Legals or an Odin or a Carter, for example. It's exactly the same as to how you would approach a crowdfund, right? You might have a 2 to 3 week period where you talk about all the traction you've achieved. What are some of the key points around the business and why people might want to invest? Key clients, team, all of that good stuff. It's effectively your business plan in a campaign, and you can ask people to sign up to a wait list, sign up for more information, maybe express interest as to how much they might be willing to invest. But make sure that CTA, make sure that request for information is very easy, and you'll get more information, more insight on the power of these people, how much they might want to invest, and you can then follow up with offline conversations. In terms of the regulatory side of things, I think just sort of err on the side of caution. Please remember that sort of your capital is at risk, and this is only available to accredited and sophisticated investors. And there is a responsibility on your side to ensure KYC, AML, all of that good stuff. If the platform provider, the SPV provider, isn't supporting on anything like that. But I think in reality, as long as you're not taking £10 investments through SPVs, giving people free mugs like you might on a crowdfunding platform, then everything's fair game.
Yeah. Well, the bit of context for the founders in the room, the reason why we're talking about this is because there's been more and more founders who are fundraising using LinkedIn. So you might have come across posts from founders who are saying that they've got an extra allocation of money. They've closed 95% of their round and they're looking for an extra 5%. And they managed to successfully raise from the LinkedIn community network that they've got, people that are following them. And there's some questions around how much that ties in with the regulatory environment. But let's assume that we're using something like a Seed Legals where they're going to do all of the checks to ensure that investors looking at a pitch or something are self-certified. From your experience with successful crowd funds, what kind of messaging has typically worked well as initial messaging that might be going out to a founders community. So let's say they've got a newsletter and they've built up a decent following on a newsletter, and they just want to hint at the fact that they might do some community. I'm calling it crowdfunding. I mean crowdfunding, not using a crowdfunding platform. So when we're talking about like a mini crowdfund, it's not using Seedrs or Crowdcube or something like that. It's managing it yourself, but you're raising from your community.
Yeah, I think you can still introduce elements of reward if you wanted to, if they are your customers. We've seen the first wave of this with the Monzos of the world do this very effectively for founding member status, beta user. I don't know if anyone saw Adam Dodd's had in his notice the free trade chat, but a pile of the comments in his LinkedIn status was, "I was free trade user number 205. This has been an amazing experience for me. Like getting feedback and supporting the growth and development of the product as a user has been really cool, etc., etc." So, as a B2C business, I think giving users an extra reason for a closer affinity to the product in some way is very powerful, and even doing that with a small group very early can be really beneficial. So giving them something exclusive, something money can't buy, I think is important. Clearly validating the fact that you've raised money offline will give them confidence that someone else has done DD. Typically, these people, professionals investing smaller tickets, are cash rich, time poor, and they're wanting to piggyback in co-invest rather than lead rounds. So, cold sending someone on a deck is going to have very, very low chance of cut through and very low chance of success. Your most likely people that will convert are your customers or your first connections, people who followed your career, followed your journey, have again been part of witnessing what you're talking about from a brand perspective, and the follow the development of the business. Basically, clearly clients are going to be very key to that. It's a very small step to go from someone who loves a product and buys it every month to becoming a shareholder. And not only that, if you're going to make the value proposition for me to become a shareholder, i.e., discounts for life or early releases on product, and giving me the ability to shape potential releases, I'm talking more tech here now, then that's very exciting.
Yeah, I like that idea. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know for sure, but if you're going for crowdfunding, once you get accepted to a platform, one of the first things that they ask you to do is write down a list of like every single person that you know. And I've heard that they then ask you to put like potential appetite for investing. And then after you've got that list, because a lot of founders say to us that they don't have any personal network at all. That's one of the things that you'd hear. So no friends and family that are in the position where they can invest, and so that's why they go for cold outreach to angels or VCs. So when you're kind of working with crowdfunding customers, how many people do you reckon you could get on a list, or where should people be looking outside of the obvious friends and family for that list?
Yeah, I mean, you have to raise money, you have to put yourself out there, right? And you have to have confidence to go and speak to people, and not having a network isn't necessarily a good excuse, in my opinion. I think the availability of these type of sessions where you can open connections and talk with people, going and pitching at different angel investment days, getting in front of people, going to networking events, building profile through social channels, primarily LinkedIn. If I'm honest with you, that's the best brand building platform for a business out there. Selling a business, that is, right? When you're selling either a B2B service or a product, or you're selling your company as a potential investment proposition, LinkedIn is the channel. So if you don't have an audience, you've got to build an audience, and then you've got to speak to that audience in an authentic, transparent, consistent way to build up trust, to build up credibility, and to layer up the validation for someone to want to take a step and invest in you. So yeah, it's a hard way of putting it, but in my opinion, if you don't have a community, you got to start somewhere. You got to look at building one.
Mm-hmm. it ties into what Sam was saying earlier, which you missed, but he was talking about LinkedIn as well. And one of the first things that they do, Hambro Perks, in their CRM is attach the founder LinkedIn profile. And so they look at how much you're talking about your product or the problem that you're solving or the problem space that you're solving in to see whether you've got that domain expertise. Do you have any tips for how to build up a bit of a follow-on in LinkedIn? And is it better to do it as a person, like a personal account, or via a business account?
Yeah, I'm not a LinkedIn guru, but I've learned a few tricks over the kind of last couple of years of playing with it. Um, I pushed myself out of my comfort zone and started a newsletter on LinkedIn, and that's been one of the hardest things I've ever done. I'm like wildly dyslexic. I hate writing, and it's probably one of the things I sort of least enjoy every month. But it's forced me to invest in a platform that I know has a huge amount of intrinsic value, both from a personal brand perspective, but just from just general kind of community and awareness perspective. So um, you hear a lot about people being consistent on LinkedIn. So posting every 1 to 2 days is consistency. I don't think I could ever do that. I can't think of anything smart to say. Never mind once a week, never mind once every day or once every 2 days. So I think it is difficult, but consistency and thinking about what you can say every couple of days, I think is the way this algorithm smartly works. I think posting off your own account is definitely got more cut through than posting off a business account. Definitely not reposting stuff. Writing organic content is more powerful. Putting your link in your comments is better from an algorithm perspective rather than in the main post. Posting with some visual or video is certainly more powerful. And commenting on influencers that you admire, respect, you're going to pop up onto other people's feeds. This is all pretty no-brainer stuff, but consistency is the key message here, right? You can't dip into LinkedIn for a few weeks and think you've solved it, and it doesn't happen overnight. So you've got to build it. And if consistency for you is one a month, then that's better than none a month, and it means you're starting. So yeah, I think you just got to get out there and start giving it a go. And it's certainly a very, very powerful tool. I'm 1 day a week at a company called wineify.co.uk at the moment. It's a wine investment platform. And we're very, very active on LinkedIn. If you want to look at some stuff that we're doing, follow Callum, the founder. He's most prolific, and his strategy on LinkedIn is very powerful at the moment. And I'd say 70-80% of our inbound is from LinkedIn at the moment. And now we're an investment platform for fine wine. So it's sort of a nice target audience on LinkedIn, but it's an incredibly powerful tool if you can get it right.
Jonathan, sorry, I didn't catch the name. Could you say it again?
Winefi.co.uk.
Thank you.
We can post it in the chat as well. We can find it for you. So
a bit of promotion for you.
with some of the crowd funds that you've been involved in, what have people done that has been particularly successful, either in terms of content that they've used or how they've distributed the content? And is there anything applicable that the founders in this group might be able to action that other people have used?
Yeah. So what is the room here? Is it a B2B, B2C, or
A mix.
bit of both?
Yeah.
Bit of mix. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, if we're going down the crowdfunding route, which is pretty linked to what you would see offline crowdfunding, like LinkedIn crowdfunding, Odin, Seed Legals type crowdfunding, then you're effective as a B2C company if you've got a customer base. Like that's a no-brainer. And I can talk a bit about what drives effective crowdfunding if you've got an addressable audience. And then if you're a B2B business, typically people are going to get more excited or have greater understanding of stuff that has emotive value in some shape, i.e., it's solving a big societal problem. Clean technology is very strong for crowdfunding, and a lot of people think that these B2B businesses can't raise, but in fact, if you see something that really resonates as a solution, then that is a key driver to want to back that business. and retail investors get very excited about that sort of thing. So the only stuff I would avoid if I was looking at crowdfunding, and that doesn't mean you don't go and raise through your community on LinkedIn or a handful of your first, second connections, is sort of really complicated, deep tech, sciencey type stuff that is just impossible to describe to anyone. And in that sense, you're really probably going to confuse traditional VCs as well. You're going to want to go to a specialist VC or fund for that sort of thing. So what works? Looking at the stuff I've done this year, so I led the crowd fund for Tallow and Ash, which is a laundry detergent brand, Naked Sprout, who do loo roll, so double down that area. I just finished Watch House Coffee. It's a coffee chain. They're quite nice. I'm doing a Bear Coffee, which is another coffee chain, which is gone. They're announcing next week, and the guys at Mission Tea, who just announced today actually. So follow in on some of those comms if you want to see what I think best in class looks like. But the rules are hard, fast, consistent, transparent, honest, really putting your brand message out there, being as personable as you can be, and layering in the validation of what value the investor will get from making that investment. Now, the angel market is propped up by SEIS and EIS. All high net worths, all angels want EIS. Anyone who says they don't, I think, is not telling the truth. So it's pretty important stuff. Clearly, there's examples where you don't qualify, and that is equally fine. But I think people are looking at as a potential tax incentive or tax break for them to as a really high kind of reason to invest, valuation and additional value. And through crowdfunding, that is all the other stuff I talked about. Can I shape the journey of the business? Can I come on as an advisor? Can I refer people in for open job positions? And you're only as your community of investors are only as good as the way you mobilize them. And thinking seriously about shareholders, because shareholders and cap tables are getting bigger and bigger because of this ability to onboard at lower entry points. The idea of smart money and people talking about that might be just 2 or 3 investors sitting on your board telling you what to do. For me, that's kind of crap. You might have the head buyer of Tesco on your cap table, but they invested £1,000, for example, as a retailer, and that might be incredibly powerful for you to onboard that person. So thinking about what smart money could look like for you as a business and the types of investors you want on a cap table. Cap tables for me are all about diversity nowadays. They're not about 1 or 2 big VCs who sit there and get paid to sit on boards and add zero value. It's all about getting as many smart people that can drive the business forward, that can be advocates of your company, that can help support you on all the different needs that you might have.
Yeah. One question, just out of interest, when you go on a crowdfunding website, the first thing you see is a video where the founders are often talking about who they are and why they're doing this. And you might even see that before you see a pitch deck. How important is that? And I guess tied to that question is, do you think that you need to communicate with potential retail investors differently to how you might communicate with a VC or a sophisticated angel? And what are the nuances in that? Is that the reason why people are told to do a video, because that's how it's better to communicate with retail investors who might be less sophisticated as investors?
So I think the answer to that is, the data suggests that video isn't a key driver, and you don't need to do a video on Crowdcube, for example. Now, I think seeders actually still want a video, but I literally was in the hot seat running the marketing department when looking at this data, and it was for hundreds of campaigns, and they don't drive any incremental value for the campaign. So they are a nice additional asset, but they're not going to kind of transform your campaign or make it successful versus another campaign that doesn't have one. To that point, investors on crowdfunding platforms, investors on LinkedIn that are thinking about investing into a startup will have some level of sophistication. ABC1, London centric, earning over 100,000 a year is the demographic on Crowdcube, average demographic. These people work in banking, in accounting, in corporate finance, in sales, in tech. They're on this platform for a reason, because they want to get involved with startups. And yes, there's a long tail of people who might be there for the free beer, but the ones that are meaningful, and those are typically going to be the ones that you're board through offline, are going to be pretty sophisticated. And I think if you dig into any of the forums, so I was running the Watch House Coffee forum a couple of weeks ago, and it's intense. I mean, the questions they ask you are like, I need to look up some of those acronyms. I generally don't know what you just asked me. So they really know their stuff. And the short answer for me is that these people typically work in the businesses like the venture capital firms, right? And they understand this stuff. So the level of sophistication is absolutely there. You don't want to be dumbing stuff down. I think the biggest reason that you see dumbed down information on crowdfunding sites is because people don't want to share too much information publicly. So they hold quite a bit back. And I think that's fair enough. You want to release that maybe in a more long form deck. You want to probably actually share that over a phone call. And crowdfunds and or LinkedIn campaigns aren't going to be converted through a completely digital activity. Like, you can't just post about it, send a link, take the money. You're still going to be having one-to-ones and coffees and lunches. That's the final hurdle in the conversion of someone to become an investor. They want to see the whites of your eyes, right? And crowdfunding is still not broken down that barrier.
Interesting. From when you were talking about the video not making that much impact on the final investment decision when you were looking through the growth stuff, what was making a difference? Like, what was the number one thing that people were responding to?
I think maybe this sounds a bit cheesy, but I think people buy from people, and people want to buy into people who are trustworthy, right? More than anything, it's believing that that person is going to do what they say they're going to do. By the time I land on a crowdfunding website or a crowdfunding pitch, I'm looking for all the reasons to not invest. Like, you've got to give me a reason not to, right? I've pretty much validated by that point. And if I'm opening the email or having a call with you, unless I'm a really strange person who's just keen for wasting both each other's time, I'm trying to find a reason not to invest. So I think it's just making sure that what you're saying is consistent, transparent, honest, authentic. All of those points are so important in today's age of everything, from investment to just being to being brand led as well. Like the story that you're delivering, and as soon as there's suddenly maybe a response on the forum that is a little bit passive aggressive, or the way that you come across hasn't been perceived very well, people are going to go back in themselves and think, actually, this one's not for me. Not a perfect answer there, but I think it's everything, which isn't great, is it? But I'm you're raising money on the day you start your company. If your journey is venture capital, if it's fundraising, every conversation you have is someone potentially impressionable who may or may not tell someone else, right? So it's your brand and what it speaks for, and what people think of it ultimately, right?
Yeah. Is it the, like, with the forum, because you just mentioned, obviously, that when you're on a crowdfunding platform, you can see the responses on the forum as a member of the public, which means that you can understand how responsive someone is being, or how much level of detail they're going into, or they might have already answered a question that you have, which if you're trying to do it via LinkedIn, you don't necessarily have that that kind of piece of technology. Is there anything that you'd recommend for someone that wants to have that kind of, outside of it all being in LinkedIn comments or something which might be a bit too public, for going into FAQs or answering people's questions. Another way to help, kind of thing.
So the best LinkedIn offline crowdfund, if that's a thing, that I've seen recently was by a chap called Julian Osborne from Batch London. So I'm seeing nods, like people genuinely saw it, right?
Yeah.
And it was world class. And if you think about how he did that, I went into a store and we talked about it a little bit, by the way, but I'm not taking any credit for it. I think it was a really well delivered campaign that wasn't necessarily very pushy. It was just slowly trickling information to build trust with people that this was a business that has legs. And there were loads of validators, from sourcing of materials to people that he'd got on board to sales updates to, and there was a little bit of negative there, like, oh, we found this really hard, right? It's showing a bit of vulnerability as a founder and authenticity as a founder, for example. And he built a really good LinkedIn campaign that really spoke to the entire brand through that period of time. Now, not every investor is going to like and comment and see all of those things. You're not going to speak to everyone who's engaging in every piece of content, right? But as that builds over time, you're going to get more and more inbounds as your call to action is, if you want to see the deck, drop me an email. Here's my email address, DM me if you want to hear more information, etc., etc. So thinking of investment as a campaign from the day you start your company to the day you exit your company, it's always on. But if you think of the active period, in Julian's case, it was the day at which he announced the fact that he was fundraising, which I think maybe was in February, March time, and it took him circa 3-4 months to close. And during that period, it was slightly more focused, right? It was, we're raising, this is how it's going, this is who's on board, this is a bit of a behind the scenes look at what we're doing from a manufacturing perspective. Here's some happy client testimonials. This is what I found hard this week. Oh, by the way, we're still fundraising. DM me. So it was consistent. I could think of some others possibly and follow up and share them, but I've seen it quite a bit, and I've seen it a lot in the last 6 to 12 months, which is how this conversation started. Because Purdy and I met, and I was like, this is kind of crazy. I'm seeing this everywhere now, and people wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't working.
I quite like the idea of thinking about your pitch deck, so problem, solution, market size, why now, team, and then turning that into a few LinkedIn posts over the course of a period of time that you're fundraising for, because I don't think anyone's necessarily said that explicitly before. Like, how do you turn what's on your deck into a campaign that you're putting out on LinkedIn? I guess it could be in an email newsletter or something, but you're taking those core pillars.
It's a fun point, isn't it? Because how backwards are pitch decks? I mean, they don't really make any sense at all. I never read them. I know, and people obsess over them to the point where they spend 6 months like really finessing this pitch deck. They could have spent 6 months talking about what they're doing on LinkedIn. I'm not doubling down entirely just on LinkedIn here, but doing lots of other things, running your business. But I don't know. It feels like they're not going to be here for much longer. Just the availability to raise in all these different ways and share all this information in all these different formats. How come it's a 10-page PDF that you still need to send to someone? But yeah, it's a fun point, isn't it? And absolutely, why not turn your pitch deck into a campaign?
Yeah, we agree, because it's like the whole building in public thing, which
exactly.
We've spoken to a few investors about building in public versus building in stealth, and what
did they say? Yeah. Anyone? Conclusion? Few bullets?
And what did they say on our panel with Alex and Dan?
They said that they would all prefer building in stealth and having amazing traction, but at the same time, you do see a lot of startups get quite a lot of publicity for building in public. So
interesting, yeah. It's very Marmite, isn't it? People have strong opinions over that stuff.
This is like fundraising in public, which kind of goes along with building in public.
Yeah.
And I've definitely seen a lot of people say something that I think then looks quite naive. You know, like you were saying with crowd funds, there's a timeline, and there are people, I see people be like, we want to close by X day, and they're 0% of the way through the round or something, and I'm like, it seems really unlikely, which makes you seem like you don't necessarily know what you're talking about, which then I immediately have an opinion. So if you're going to put timelines around it, which you have to do with crowdfunding, what do you think the best way is to do so? I know that with crowdfunding, often you've raised quite a large chunk before it's even live on the platform, which helps. But how should people be thinking about it?
Yeah, the whole raising a large chunk off platform is sort of linked in a sense. How did you go about raising that large chunk, right? It's like, what doors were you opening to enable that? Your large chunk could be 50 grand from an individual. It depends on the round size, right? Or it could be 5 million quid from a VC. I think at the point at which you've got that money there and confirmed, it's the ticking time bomb, and it's the driver. How do you drive FOMO effectively towards an end date? And what validators do you want to chuck at people to get them excited about wanting to also come on board? And it's effectively like, yeah, if you don't get on board, you're gonna miss out, because this is the deadline. It's a very hard one to commit to, because there's all the concern of like, well, what if it doesn't happen? But people are going to forget quite quickly, if I'm honest with you. It's not this big spectacular failure thing that people get so worried about that it's suddenly on the front page of the business section of the Times. It's just not a thing. And it's just another speed bump in your entrepreneurial journey, which is gnarly anyway, right? So I wouldn't get too pent up about that. It's gave it a go, didn't work, move on to the next thing. But if you don't give it a go, you're not gonna know whether it's gonna work or not. Oh yeah, so I just saw that. It's just seen that question. I mean, like personally, I don't think necessarily success can be whatever you want it to be, I guess, within reason, right? Like raising 100 grand or raising 1 million. And I don't know. I would also find it really hard, which is why I find it hard to really kind of push this agenda of like, just go and do it, because I totally feel it, and I would find it quite difficult to put myself out there as well. But I do think unless you give it a go, you're not going to know.
Yeah. Have you seen anything that people have done? We can move to Q&A after this. So if anybody has a question that you want to ask directly, you can raise your hand or post it in the chat. Is there anything that you've seen people do that really didn't work or didn't resonate or just didn't have the results that they expected?
I think you know your audience and you know your customers better than you think you do as to what their reception will be for something like this. So if you know that actually your business is B2B to C and you don't really have a direct relationship with your customers, then going into crowdfunding without any type of education and just cracking on with it isn't going to work, right? You need to sort of be confident that the addressable audience is warmed up enough to want to buy into what you're talking about. And if you're a B2B business, again, that could be 6 months of like really consistent work on LinkedIn that isn't talking about the fundraiser tool. It's just brand building. It's kind of, building your own profile up and starting to get some traction around this idea that your business is doing cool stuff and it's on a great trajectory. Therefore, when the messaging of the fact that your fundraising comes out, the person who's been digesting that has got it in the back of their mind that could be a cool opportunity to get behind. So it comes back to the first point of like, again, this isn't a 2-week thing. This is something that needs to start now, and you will build up on over time. And it's just part of your brand building strategy. So going into it thinking that it's going to be easy, I know it's not what you want to hear. Even as a B2C business with a large audience, I think it's pretty dangerous. Now I've seen companies with millions of people as an addressable audience who have failed at crowdfunding, because there's the streak of arrogance, I guess, going in there.
In terms of community, I'll get to the couple of questions coming through in the chat, but
yeah,
I can ask those, or Kelly and Harry, you can ask it yourself. In terms of community, I think people are starting to see now that there is a return on investment for having a community around you. And then there's some businesses that lean more into having community, and others that don't feel like that they're that kind of business, that having a community around them makes sense. But can you talk a bit more about community and the ROI of community?
Well, you guys are great community builders, aren't you? So maybe you should be answering this one. But for me, I think it's about, what does community mean to you? Now, that might be a really amazing digest of the wine landscapes investment news on a weekly basis that pops up in your inbox. And linked to that, you've got quarterly events where people can get together. That might be your community strategy, right? And it's the ability to solve a problem in your customer base that people want. Getting together and talking with fellow wine enthusiasts about trends in the market and getting bits of information that are going to help incite decisions as to sort of things they might want to invest next in, for example. It's how you then, once you've got an engaged community that are turning up, that are reading, open rates, click-through rates, attendance, etc. It's how you further engage them to bring them even closer to your brand, and then turn them into powerful ambassadors, net referrers, and ultimately reduce churn and increase basket size or increase customer account value. So it's I'm trying to think of your question again, but what's good community? It totally depends on what you're trying to drive. But if I was thinking, okay, like, what do good business metrics look like for me, and then work backwards on the sort of things that I need to do to, try and drive some of the behaviors within the community to achieve those metrics. That's probably how I'd be approaching it. And it's not like it's an untrodden path, right? There's so many examples of similar people who have approached this very, very well. My other piece of advice on community is, if you're seed stage, pre-Series A, genuinely pre having a good amount of money to invest in people, unless community is seriously core to your business, like at the beating heart of your business, you're going to pretty much need a community manager and someone working on it relatively full time to do it super well. So define what community means to you and be happy that that is good. And if that's an email newsletter that you send out consistently every week, then stay true to that and deliver on that as your first kind of lever. But trying to take that any further for the stage of business you are is going to be impossible. So don't overcommit, up until the point at which, again, you're seeing the results of which community starting to pay back, and actually you might want to go in and start doing some other bits around, let's say, a Discord channel, or community forums where people can share information, get together, that sort of thing. But ultimately, always keep in the back of your mind, like, what business metric are you trying to drive here? Because it's a marketing lever, it's a growth lever. And if I'm the head of growth and I'm the head of marketing, how am I going to attribute that budget and attribute that value ultimately? People talk about being community led and investing in community and all this good stuff. It's like, what metric is it driving?
Yeah, that makes sense. We've got a few questions in the chat. One of them, I think, is probably somewhat putting you on the spot, but I'm interested to hear what your answer is. A decade in crowdfunding, you must have a gut feeling on whether a crowdfund is going to be successful or not based on what the business is, which is kind of what I think this question is. So do you find it easy to crowdfund for a business/fintech focused on connection between the UK and Africa that's not a charity? So the business is similar to Revolut, connecting EU countries. Kelly, do you want to add a bit more context on what the business does?
Yeah, sure. I think essentially it's just like facilitating payments, cross-border payments. and creating like digital wallets so that if you are out in Europe, you could swap between currencies in Africa and you can make payments for goods and services there. So it's just similar to the Revolut model, but kind of geared towards targeting the audience in Europe, but enabling them to do transactions cross-border.
I think in reality, for a company that and your customers are where, Kelly? Are they in the UK, in Africa, and both?
Yes, they're in the UK, yes.
In the UK. I think it's trying to understand what motivations they might have to become shareholders of your business. What demographic are they, and what could incentivize them alongside owning a part of the company, and whether that's something that you think you could confidently drive an outcome for. If you were to put forward the idea of those customers investing £100 and what benefit you could give them alongside equity, trying to understand that, and would that convert them to invest, would very quickly give you the answer. And I think you can dip your toe in the water and send an email out, and like, it's non-committal, right? Like, we're exploring crowdfunding, we're exploring the idea of raising from our community. You don't even need to use the word crowdfunding. If we were to do this, would this be something you're interested in? Simple Google form, yes or no. Don't need to go any further than that. And there again, you have an immediate shortlist of people who might want to invest in your business. And if you get 100 people on that list, you can then follow up and say, oh, you're interested to find out more. One of those individuals could have 100 grand to invest. So that's a very quick way to shortlist some people that might want to be interested in investing in your business. Again, your customers are going to be the closest potential people to your company than anyone from day one, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Alexandra, I see your question in the chat. Do you want to ask it live?
Sure. Hi. Thanks for the session. I think it was very, very useful. I was just wondering, say we do like a campaign on LinkedIn, which I think is great, especially based on what you shared with us today. But once we go out there, that means that, and we share with the LinkedIn network, that means we share with investors, but we also share with existing customers and clients. And I was just thinking, we don't know what's going on in our clients' heads, right? So they might start thinking that, oh, this business, this company, they know that we're a startup, but you don't know what's going on in their head. So they might start thinking, oh, they don't have the required funds to, serve me as a client, or there may be some harm, I think, on their side. It might be very useful to get attention and to get the investors in, but I think there is potentially, I don't know what you think about it. I just wanted your opinion on, whether it could be harmful for the clientele.
I don't honestly have a strong opinion on this. I think, like, if you look at the types of companies that have crowdfunded and gone on to be big businesses, it's clearly not impacted their commercial traction or their ability to grow. Quite the opposite. So, again, building advocacy within 100 or 200 or even 50 people that are shareholders that can drive your business forward, I think has got greater benefit to you than public perception from the minority. And I would say it is probably more likely to be the minority group that are sitting there saying, mudslinging a business because maybe they want to start their own business, or just got nothing better to do, right? And you're going to face people that are probably being negative about what you're doing. If you're fundraising in a public format, it's just goes hand in hand with talking about stuff publicly, right? So in the same way, you're going to get lots of no's from VCs, you're going to get lots of feedback from people on public forums about anything that you're doing in business, and it's just another one of the speed bumps. But I would say that the benefit, I think, outweighs the cost of negative perception, if that's what we're talking about here. And I think it's a shame that crowdfunding has been dragged through the mud a little bit and perceived more negatively as a last resort of funding and all these other things, because sadly that's how it started. And if you think about Crowdcube or Seed as their own business trying to get traction, right? And they spent 5 years like fighting the regulator to allow for retail to invest at a low threshold. And they were doing pretty gritty deals. And I was part of that. And we were doing everything that we could to make money and get traction in a market that really hated us. They thought that we were trying to turn the whole VC market into a platform. And it's quite the opposite, really, because we're complementing traditional forms of fundraising, right? And then 2015, 2016 was an unlock because we invested alongside venture capital firms. And then pretty much from that point, it's always been co-investment. But on a small scale, that might be an angel or might be family and friends alongside your customers, alongside your community, alongside your LinkedIn connections, etc. So it's another complementary form of fundraising, right? The irony here is that VCs are on LinkedIn, and I think that's the important point. And building a brand that people hopefully will have already made a business decision over or investment decision over by the time you have that conversation with them, I think is the important point of today. So negative perception of crowdfunding, I think, is a thing, but you can't really question it when you've got companies like Monzo, Revolut, Brewdog, Free Trade. 4 out of the 10 unicorns in the UK were crowdfunded on Crowdcube, something bonkers like that. And there's piles of £100 million, £250 million, £500 million plus businesses that have crowdfunded very successfully. So it's all part of the journey, I think.
Do you know how many, like average wise, how much investment, if you're raising on a platform, comes from investors you already know or that are in your network versus you getting exposure to a brand new group of investors via the platform?
Yeah, it depends how many people have got an account on Crowdcube. So I think it's about 3 million accounts on Crowdcube now. A lot of them are dormant, but you might have signed up at one point and then not invested ever and what have you. So it's quite hard to deduce in some ways. But the campaign I'm doing at the moment was almost exactly a 50-50 split. And those were net new user accounts to someone who already had a membership on Crowdcube. I've seen it every cut you can imagine. 90-10 one way, 90-10 the other way. The best way to look at it is a third in lead investment, price lead investment, a third in your own customer base, your own community, and that could be as a B2B company on LinkedIn or through any other channel you have, or as a B2C company, your customers. So predominantly an email campaign to your end customers. And then the top third is Crowdcube members, people who are new to you, but are interested in investing in startups like EIS investments, get excited about getting involved in cool businesses early stage. But it's pretty much even if you were to take an average, those even buckets.
That's really useful to know, because I think some people think that if they don't know any investors, that they're going to meet 100% of their investors via a platform who are coming in to their business, like getting exposed to their business for the first time. So either way, you have to do the community outreach and engagement with customers.
It's the same chance of landing a cold outbound on LinkedIn with a pitch deck. I don't know how many people have done that, but how many times does that land? So doing that on a crowdfunding platform is highly unlikely to be successful. You need to again be engaging and communicating with these people over a period of time to build up validation to want to invest in the business.
That's fair. Gaynor, were you saying that you wanted to ask a question live?
Yeah, that'd be great, thanks. Hi, I'm working in the creative industry sector and we're very experienced in live events. And the project that we've got is to make it easier to create immersive live events. I'm wondering if you've got any examples either with physical products of live events that have helped with crowd fundraising?
Not off the top of my head. Events, I've seen a couple of event companies. Secret Cinema was a cool one. I can't think now off the top of my head, I'm afraid. But feel free to
fundraise through a crowd platform.
Yeah, fundraise on Crowdcube. I don't think it was a great exit. that they sold to some big pro equity company in the US. I think I invested 100 quid. Don't know where that's gone. So yeah, ping me your details. I'll take a deeper look, and we can look for some
Yeah,
comparables.
that'd be great. Thanks a lot.
And Harry.
Sorry. Hey, that was really helpful. Thank you. A quick question, very, very brief context. We run a social discovery mobile application that connects people based on shared hobbies. So, I think we would lend ourselves very well to crowdfunding. There's a reasonable sort of social good element to what we do as well. And obviously it's very community based. We have actually spoken to Crowdcube. We're a little bit too early. I think we need a little bit of a more critical mass of user base. My question in the crowdfunding space is, do you have any experience of Kickstarter? I know it's not straight equity fundraising, but as a way to build profile and build exposure. Have you ever come across any Kickstarter success stories?
I bought this on Kickstarter 15 years ago, and it still works. And Kickstarter is the thing that got me excited about crowdfunding. So I was a very big user of Kickstarter and Indiegogo back in the glory days. I think you've got to work a lot harder to stand out on those platforms nowadays. And from what I understand, you need to spend a lot of money to get going. And I think they're more pre-sales than fundraising. So you've got to be basically giving away stuff to get early traction to start selling some new release of a product effectively. And that is your campaign. And to achieve that, to stand out from the 1,000 other people that are also doing a rewards-based crowdfund at the same time, you need to put about 50%, and I'm not even joking, of what you're fundraising into paid advertising. The thing about equity crowdfunding is that it's not about acquiring people on a net new audience perspective through paid. It's about engaging with people who are already familiar with your company or already familiar with you, and selling an authentic message to them about investing in the business. So if you think of rewards based as like literally a really kind of hyped up paid advertising campaign, and you think of equity as, how do I talk to the people who are first connections of the business and build up an authentic narrative to compel them to invest?
That's helpful. Thank you.
And then final question, we've got a minute, from Alessio. You're on mute.
I was starting straight away. Yeah, just a quick one. Is it true that in a crowdfunding platform, basically it's better to raise a small amount of money rather than big amount of money? Because in that way you keep yourself into the first page, so the traffic is higher on your side, so you can literally stay on the top of the wave rather than go back down and the other pages.
So on Crowdcube, there's not lots of pages on Crowdcube or Seedrs, but to be at the top, you're right that every new investment sends you to the top. But there isn't a lot of organic traffic on a crowdfunding website. People aren't sitting on their sofa browsing Crowdcube and Seedrs to make investment opportunities, to make investments. People are educated and engaged about potential opportunities because they might know the brand already. And again, you don't necessarily need to be a customer. I just might follow you on LinkedIn, as we discussed at length, right? So the way that you do that with high energy is you build a funnel over a 2-week period where hopefully these people are potentially interested and invested. It's called early access, priority access, expressions of interest. And then you hit it hard for 7 days. All of the campaigns that I've advised on this year have been opened and closed within 4 to 5 days. There's no point doing it longer, because you've already built up the potential, the bucket of interest. They've already made a soft decision to want to commit to invest in the company, and then you just want to hit them hard for 4 or 5 days, basically. It's now available. Get involved, and people are, oh my god, I've got to go in now. It's a bit of a trick, but it's the best way of converting and getting the highest conversion for the amount of people that are potentially interested. So short answer is high energy on a crowdfund is best, but trickling investment and things like that it's not gonna gain you any extra brownie points, I don't think.